All right. So we're going to dive into a little bit of clothing creation or outfit creation for your character. Now, clearly, the model I have here already has some clothing on it, um, but what we have here is incredibly simple to create. Um, there's obviously a lot of different methods that go into creating clothing. Really just depends on the end use of that clothing. If we're going to be doing um, a character that can have skin tight clothes, kind of like this, kind of like a lot of your more cartoonish characters tend to have, and we're not going to be swapping things out, such as the gloves or the boots or the shirt. So there's no item exchange or item equip that has a visual difference in this game. Then we can simply grab our character's topology, the existing topology, and create that new piece of clothing. So for instance, if I wanted to have, let me turn my object symmetry off here. Let's say I wanted an armband right here. If I don't care about being able to swap this thing in and out, I'm just going to come into my faces. I'm going to find some face loops that I'm interested in using. I make that selection, Command E or Control E. So I'm going to do an extrusion, and I'm going to come down here. I can use thickness, or I can use my local Z translate, either one. I can bump that off, and then let's add a little bit of a bevel to it and some segments. There we go. Now we're using the exact topology of the object or the existing character to create a little armband. And obviously we would still need to come in here, select those faces again, and you would want to change out your material. I come into my let's make it the same color as the shirt, just so it kind of jumps off of there. Alright. So now you've got a nice armband. Now, if we wanted this armband to be its own object, maybe it's something that levels up with your character. So I'm going to come down here. Let's say that he's got an armband a little further down, something in this area. I can come in, find the exact areas that I'm looking to create this armband again. Make a nice thick armband this time. And we're going to make it its own object. We're going to do that by duplicating the topology, the existing topology. So there's two places we can find it. One is up here inside of our dock. See this little guy right here? It's duplicate. So we're duplicate the current selected faces in a new shell and show manipulator to adjust their offset. We can also come into edit mesh, and down here we'll find duplicate. Alright, if it's already in the dock, there's no sense for me to go in and fiddle around through there, so I'm just going to go ahead and say duplicate. Bam. Now, something a little funky has happened to that new shell. That is pretty weird. I'm going to say that more than likely it's because there's some settings inside of the mesh, inside the edit mesh version that we don't like. Probably the offset. So let's undo that. we're going to come up here. Let's go back into our edit mesh. Come down to duplicate. Let's look at our options. Let's see. Currently the offset is set to 0. So theoretically it shouldn't have done anything. Let's hit apply. And there we go. That's what should have happened. And let's turn that off. And now we have our brand new object. We can see, let me put this right there. This poly surface 2 and our poly surface 1. Remember, anytime you do a separate or combine, or in this case, mirroring sometimes does it. Booleans can do it. And anytime we're doing this type of work, it's going to create what's called poly surface. So it really doesn't matter what you did have it named. It's not going to be named that any longer. So this is still your body, and this new poly surface, that's now your wristband. So let me come in here, wristband 01, there we go. And I was going to call this body. There we go. So let's grab that wristband. I'm going to delete the history on this guy. I don't really want it any longer, as well as the history on this. Let me focus in here. So how do we use this guy? Well, it's the exact same topology. We could theoretically come in and scale it, but you notice I hit my scale key. We don't see anything. Why don't we see anything? Well, we don't see anything as in our manipulator, because this new object's manipulator is created at the center of the world. So the object is here, but the pivot point is at the center of the world, 0, 0, 0 point. So the first thing we would need to do, if we're going to try to scale this, is center the pivot. We can do so from the dock, or we can come to modify, center pivot. All right. So now we can come in and theoretically we could scale this out, and we have an object that sits off of our model. However, you'll notice that this is getting our topology out of alignment, and it's elongating our object. We could do that by scaling it differently, but we also aren't we're not sticking to the original shape any longer. So, and we're not 3D. So what we're going to do is do the extrusion. So I'm going to hit Command E because I'm on a Mac, Control E if you are on a PC. I'm going to use my local Z translate again. I'm going to bump that off. Now what this local Z translate is doing is it's using the normals of each one of these faces and pulling these faces out on their own normal, their own individual Z axis. Alright. Then we can come in, do our bevel, boom. Maybe I bump this guy up. Maybe I want this like 0.75 and add some segments. There we go. Looks good. Alright. Hit Q to exit out of that tool. Maybe we come in here, grab this edge loop. Maybe we want to add just a little bit more definition to this guy. Pull it in a little bit like that. Make it feel like it's kind of scrunchy. There we go. Now you've got a new model sitting on top of the existing model that shares very similar topology. So it should animate with this. Now granted, this is the forearm, so it's not going to be doing a lot of stretching or squashing or really much of anything. Maybe a touch of twisting, but very, very little. But you would end up skinning this with the existing model, with the same faces that exist underneath of it. All right. So that's one method, by using our duplicate faces and creating a new mesh. And the second method, by extruding directly off of the object. All right. Both of them have their benefits, and both of them have some downfalls. Now, depending on how restrictive your face count has to be, you can still take this guy and get it down a little bit further in its face count. So if I hit Command 1 while I'm selected on that, it's going to isolate the view of this guy. And I can roll in here, and I can get rid of these faces on the inside. I could delete those, come into my edge, select this edge and that edge, hit Command 1. You notice that brings it back to here again. And if I need to, you'll notice that these edges, because they were created directly with this, they're already snapped to this. But if for some reason I get to animate in this and it's showing some separation for some reason, you can always take this guy and scale it inwards just a little bit. All right, just kind of punch that edge loop inside a little. All right, and then that, once you've skinned it and start to animate it, should keep this from clipping or ripping around, and you won't have to process any of those faces. So we haven't reduced the number of faces on this guy an incredible amount, but every face counts, especially if we start dealing with lower memory outputs like mobile. All right. I'm just going to leave the faces on for mine. There we go. And back to here. And let me come in, go to make this the shirt color. All right, so now we got two armbands. Super easy stuff to make. The next thing we want to look at is how do we make things like sleeves or pant legs if I wanted some heavy duty pants. We'll go with sleeves as if we're going to make like a jacket. All right, maybe some sort of 3/4 length thing. Now this is going to be a slightly different process, and what makes this so interesting is we want this object, this shirt sleeve, to bump itself off of an arm. All right. So we're going to start off. We could start off with a tube, or a cylinder, I should say, or we could start off with a cube. Doesn't particularly matter which method we use. I'll just do both, one on each arm. And we'll hide this for now. Don't need that guy. So if I wanted to start off with a cylinder here, I'm sorry, a cube. Helps if I remember what primitive I just selected. We can look at this guy and say, well, how many faces are we going to need to wrap around this particular arm? Well, we probably don't need quite as many as we have in the model. And if we need to see how many edges we have, we can simply come in here, select this. We have 24 verts, so we have 24 edges coming up through. So we can figure out how many edges we need to get around this to get some similar level of animation or animatability. So for 24 goes in, if we want the exact same, into 4 sides. 24 times 6, or 24 is 4 times 6, so we need to get 6 divisions on each side here. So we're going to do that. Attributes, polycube, come in here, there we go. And if I look at this, I don't actually need, grab my faces, I don't actually need these faces right here, because this is going to be, oops, always check your selection before you delete it. There, because this is going to be a sleeve, right? So we're going to come in here, I'll pop myself out to the side perspective really fast just so I can line this up fairly well. And then we're going to scale it up so that it's big enough to go around the entire arm. Translate it. Let's get it roughly to the center. Let's scale this guy out. Something like this. Looks pretty good. I'm going to check it real fast to make sure it's lined up in all 3 axes so that my tube sleeve goes around it. Now I could have done this, like I said, with a cylinder as well. The results would be pretty much the same. I personally really like the UVs and topology on cubes. So we have this right here. What we want is for this sleeve to inherit a similar shape to the arm, all right, so that it doesn't just look like a block on his arm. We want it to look like this thing was tailored to fit him in some form or fashion. All right, so I need to delete my history on this so we don't bugger anything up. I'm also going to freeze transformations. So I'm going to call this sleeve 01. There we go. And then we need to shift click our object, i.e. our character. So we have the sleeve and the character selected. And then we need to get this to inherit generally the shape of this. So we do that by coming to our deform menu and then coming down to Shrinkwrap. We're going to go to the options. Now reset settings. Now if we use our default settings, we're going to get some really funky results. If I hit apply, it's going to take all that stuff and try to, this sleeve, and try to yank it as best as it can down towards this pivot point, which is absolutely not what we want. Let me undo. What we want is for it to wrap to the sleeve. So we're going to come up to this projection setting, and we're going to take that and bring it to closest. Alright, now when I hit apply, it's going to wrap this guy around my sleeve. Now we can tell that there's going to be some jankiness because I don't have very many subdivisions. Let me undo real fast. Let me come back into my edge mode. I'm going to add in real quick some extra edge loops so that this has something to pivot around. I'm just holding control with my multi-cut tool and middle clicking to get perfect central edge loop. Alright, hit Q, exit out of that. Let's go back into our object modes. And we're going to go in to apply again. Boom. Now, what just happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. We have a lot of history on this. So I need to undo that, re-grab, delete my history, and come back in and try this again. Alright, so now we're on closest. I apply, boom, it shrink wraps it just like we want. Remember, history can be a real pain in the butt. It can really, really bugger up your system here. So, you notice that it's got a little bit of a funk going on up here near the armpit. If I come on and grab this guy, we can still move this sleeve up and down with a little bit of grace, a little bit of ease, and get some interesting results. I would say this is pretty nice right here. We're getting a decent wrap. Now, this is really sucking down to that surface, which isn't exactly what we're wanting. We still want this to puff up off of the surface. So I'm going to come into my attribute editors, and I'm coming over to that shrink wrap. Notice we have in shrink wrap an offset and a target inflation. These work fairly similarly. I can come in to this offset and start to push this, offset it away from the surface of the object. Alright. Now you'll notice there is still some funk in here, and we'll talk about how we clean that up here in just a second. First we want to get the general shape that we're looking for. So you notice offset does it like so, and our inflation works very similar as well. I generally just stick with offset. So I'm going to pull that up. Maybe we'll just go all the way with it. We can still adjust here if we like, if we need to. Now some of this funkiness in the geometry here is caused by it trying to snap itself either to the arm or the armband that we have underneath here. Same thing's going on here. This is trying to focus on this little glove cuff that we have, so it's kind of messing things up a touch, but we can fix those things. If we're happy with the general size that we have, we want to go ahead and freeze, well, not freeze transformations, we want to go ahead and delete our history. That'll separate the link to that last deformer. And then we can come in and start to play around with the geometry itself. Now you'll notice that there's a little bit of funk going on in here. We can fix this pretty easily. We can come into our vertex. I'm going to select this ring of vertices. We can do 2 at a time, or we can do 1 at a time. We're going to come in to our edit mesh, and we're going to find our average. So we have vertex, average vertices. I'm just going to go ahead and say boom, like so. Now that's one version of it. We can, or one iteration. We can come in and hit G again. I just tap G a few times, get that thing looking nice. You can also do this if I select an edge loop, like so. And this is averaging these guys out, smoothing them out on that surface. Now you'll also notice that it shrinks this guy down a little bit. So if it starts to shrink it down too terrible much, you'll want to pump up the volume, as in scale it back out to something to bring the shape back to where you want it. But if you don't mind the shape that it gives you, then continue as you were. Alright, we're starting to get something pretty nice. You'll notice that that one gets a little weird. That's fine. We can grab this guy, translate it back out to where we need it. Not too bad. Same thing on this one. I grab that and then just pull it back up, scale it out a little bit. So with a pretty insignificant amount of work, we can get some fairly nice topology. Now there's still a few areas in here that you would want to clean up, like this. I would delete my history, come in, grab the vertices, and then I would just slide these. You can hold down, if I hit my W, hold down Shift and Control, and you can slide that along that edge. So if you really need these to line themselves up a little better, you can use that method as well. And we've done a lot of this stuff in class already, so these techniques, this basic stuff shouldn't be too foreign to you. Basic modeling principles. But hopefully this shrink wrap technique helps out a good bit. And I would come in, mesh display, soften my edges so that it feels real nice. Now, how do I handle this little edge down here? You could, depending on the necessary memory, you could keep it just like so, or we could do a extrusion. If I hit R and then I hold Shift, I can extrude this inwards pretty quickly. And hit W, I'm going to hold Shift. I'm going to pull this guy back just a little bit. You could also do a Control E, undo all that, Control E or Command E, and deal with your thickness. Like so. That's going to give you a pretty nice pipe-like effect. It also allows you to have this cuff. If for whatever reason we focus in on the hand, we're not seeing back faces right here. Now, I wouldn't take this all the way up into the sleeve. That would be pointless. But I might take it just a little bit up here like so, just to give the illusion of 3 dimensions. Do all those. Another thing we could do is come in and grab this cuff right here, and we could actually extrude this off. So let's come in here, local Z. So we can bump this off a little bit here, give it some sort of interesting cuff feel, and then come down, grab this internal edge, and then do another extrusion. Like so. I would probably take this guy and scale it inwards just a wee bit to prevent it from clipping during animation in towards anything. Like, you don't want that to clip out here. Then we can come in as well, do a little bit of that hard surface modeling that we took care of last semester. Add some quick bevels, Control B, increase our fraction. Pop an additional segment on there. And now you've got a nice jacket cuff, or the basic version of a nice jacket cuff. Like I said, you can do the exact same thing with the cylinder on the other side. Results will be the same. Count how many faces you need and drop them in there. More than likely I didn't need anywhere near the 24. That was just to get a perfect or semi-perfect match to the existing 24 on here. Now, moving along, let's say that we want to do something with the chest. There's a few ways we could go about this. We could get a tube, pull it up through here, wrap it around, and shrink wrap this tube to make the beginnings of a jacket. We can also come in and use essentially the chest portion of our existing character and its topology and create a jacket out of that. I'm going to pause here real quick and save what we have in the video and come right back.